We all know that feeling when nothing's really happening, but then all of a sudden you find yourself reaching for your phone. You don't plan on looking anything up. You don't plan on texting anybody or calling anybody or checking your emails. No, you just reach for your phone unconsciously. I found myself doing this so many times in the last, honestly, like 10 years, 15 years since I've had a smartphone. And from what I can tell, this is something that many other people can also relate with. And what I've realized, especially over these last 3 or 4 years with doing my inner work of meditation and mindfulness and et cetera, is that we do this, for the most part, we do this because we want to avoid the present moment. Our minds have been conditioned to think that when there's nothing going on and when it's just us and our thoughts, that's a bad thing. So we avoid these quiet moments, all these opportunities for peace and silence, because we subconsciously think it's something to avoid rather than something to embrace. And somewhere along the way, whether it's more recently or maybe it's from 15 years ago, you lost the ability to sit in silence and just be with your thoughts. It's interesting because boredom is something that used to be a part of everyday life. I remember being a kid and thinking, I'm so bored, I don't know what to do, whether that would be in a long car ride or on a rainy day or in any other moment throughout my time. And nowadays, it's just simply not the case. I try to think back of any time I really experienced boredom, unless it was deliberate through a meditation session or something like that. And it's really not too common. Boredom used to be a natural part of everyday life. And now we tend to consider it as something to avoid, something to escape, something that isn't good because you're not getting anything done or you're not looking anything up or you're not enjoying yourself with entertainment. But the interesting thing is that when you can embrace boredom, you're allowing a certain part of your mind to generate your best ideas. You are tapping into something that most people don't. You're essentially tuning into the frequency that your subconscious mind is trying to speak to you. The thing is, this is only possible when you embrace boredom. And we're living in times where most people simply don't. We avoid it. We think it's scary. And that's why, in my belief, many people think the same, many people have shallow opinions, and many people don't truly understand their true values and beliefs within themselves. When I first started meditating about 3 years ago, I found it very difficult to just kick back and do nothing. Not only was my attention span completely fried, but I had this deeply ingrained belief that if I was doing nothing, then I was wasting time. And you see, there are many reasons why this is. We could blame hustle culture, we could blame the Industrial Revolution which shaped the workplace, we could blame the fact that people have endless entertainment right at their fingertips. There are so many reasons why. But the main thing is that the main realization I came to eventually was that boredom is actually a great thing. In order to think clearly and build a stronger connection with our intuition and clearly understand our values and deeply held beliefs, it's something we need to embrace. It's something we need to deliberately, intentionally explore every single day, even if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Now you might be thinking, come on, man, how can I sit for 10 minutes embracing boredom when I got so much to do? Or how can I do that when I can't even sit down for 10 seconds? And I'm laughing because that was me just a few years ago. As I mentioned, my attention span was completely fried. My mind would be here, and everywhere else, worrying about problems that I quite honestly shouldn't have been worrying about. Along with this, as I've talked about in many other videos, I was completely addicted to short form content and social media, and just always being plugged into some sort of noise, whether that was music or podcasts or whatever else. And it turns out there's actually a neuroscience-backed explanation as to why this is. You see, our brains are information-seeking machines, and evolutionary science backs this up. You see, back in previous times, when our ancestors were alive thousands of years ago, the world was a very dangerous place, and our brains needed to be on high alert, always scanning the environment, looking for new information to help us survive. We were looking for food and water and supplies that could be useful for building shelter. All these things directly influenced, or affected rather, our ability to survive. And if our brains weren't seeking out that information, then we wouldn't be able to cultivate the resources and do the things we needed to do in order to keep living. But these days, it's is very different. Our survival needs are mostly met. If you're fortunate enough to be watching this video, then you have the internet, you have electricity, you have heat and AC and a fridge and all these other things, most likely. So rather than having to scan your environment for things that'll help you survive, what we do is we go online and we just consume more and more information. We're looking for that novelty because novelty creates dopamine. And that was exactly what I experienced a number of years back. The internet and social media has provided us with the most accessible information that we could possibly ever want. So our brains can still follow that same circuit of being novelty-seeking machines and looking for new pieces of information, but it's just on a different scale these days. We're exposed to way more information, and the information we're exposed to doesn't directly influence our everyday survival. So this is the situation we're in. Anyways, I say all that just to really drive the point home, like, yeah, the main reason why many of us can't embrace boredom is because we have conditioned our brains, not only through behavioral conditioning, but it's also a neurological mechanism deep within us to always need constant stimulation, and we have the information right at our fingertips. So that's why we have such a hard time embracing boredom. Now, the issue is that when you're always taking in more information from the external world through videos and podcasts and whatever else, then it's impossible to hear the information that's coming from inside of you. And I know that sounds crazy, but in these last few videos, I talked a lot about the subconscious mind and how powerful the subconscious mind is. You see, the subconscious or the unconscious mind can process billions of bits of information per second. In fact, it's probably processing things that we can't even perceive with our eyes and our ears and whatever other sense you want to take into consideration. And the unconscious mind has this essentially endless pit or endless well of information that is all based on your experiences, all the places you've been, all the things you've heard, all the beliefs that have been ingrained in you, all of the thoughts you've had in the past are all deep within your subconscious mind. And there's actually a system within your brain called the default mode network that essentially only activates when your conscious mind isn't actively doing something that takes a lot of brain power. It activates when your unconscious mind or your subconscious mind is actually taking more control of your actions. So for example, when you're doing something monotonous and simple like washing the dishes, or when you're folding laundry, or when you're going for a walk without your phone, or when you're driving down the highway on the way back from work and there's really no cars on the road, you kind of get into that state where your mind is just elsewhere. That is when the default mode network activates. Or another example I forgot to mention, shower thoughts. Some people mention having these profound ideas when they're in the shower. That's because when you're in the shower, you're not really thinking consciously about much. You're just washing your body, letting the water hit you, and your default mode network activates, which allows your unconscious mind to process that information in the background, hence giving you these awesome ideas. And when it comes to the default mode network, there have been so many studies investigating this. And scientists have found that it helps with critical thinking, your forward planning, increasing your intuition, increasing your creativity, and problem solving with your everyday life. All right? These are things that we could all benefit from. These are things that somebody with peak mental clarity experiences. And the cool thing about this is that even well before the neuroscience came out, some of the greatest thinkers of our world embraced boredom. You got somebody like Nietzsche, who went for very long hikes in the woods. You got Soren Kierkegaard, who went for very long walks in his town. You have Albert Einstein, he's notorious for playing the violin. You have Carl Jung, who would literally do daydreaming through active imagination. These guys shaped what we know about the world and the mind throughout their work. And I think a big part of that was the fact that they were willing to embrace boredom. Even Nikola Tesla, who's essentially the pioneer in modern day telecommunication and is a big part of why we have electricity at the magnitude that we do today, he was notorious for going into these deep states of meditation, these altered states of consciousness in order to get his best ideas. All these guys, they knew how vital it was to tap into something beyond themselves, but within themselves, by embracing boredom, by embracing those low demand activities where their mind wasn't really thinking about whatever their work was. Look, I know these are things that you've already heard before. You gotta unplug, you gotta stop consuming so much, yada, yada, yada. But seriously, I've seen this within my own life. When I intentionally step back from social media, step back from watching videos, step back from even reading books from time to time, my ability to connect these completely different ideas is far superior than what it was before. And I truly believe, I truly know that you can experience the same. Because if you want to think clearly, then you can't let external forces control your life. Because where your attention goes, energy flows, and your energy determines what you spend your time doing. So if you're spending your time consuming and doing all these things that are directed by forces outside of you, then you really don't have this sort of autonomy that you think you do. And look, you're a human. Clear thinking and intuitive insights are what make you human. So if you're always plugged in, then it's impossible to think clearly and it's impossible to tap into that intuition. All right, so yeah, hope this makes sense. Hope you got something out of this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon.